The smoke was the first thing people noticed, because smoke doesn't care about reputations. It rolled out of the kitchen door in a pale gray ribbon, curling up toward the dining room lights like a warning trying to be polite. Then the fire alarm chirped once, then twice, then exploded into a full scream that made forks freeze midair and turned the restaurant's soft jazz into panic. Diners stood, chairs scraping, voices rising, and at the entrance to the kitchen, in the glare of heat and flashing red lights, restaurant owner Charles Halverson did what he always did when something threatened his image. He pointed at the black chef. "Get him out!" Charles shouted, loud enough for guests, staff, and the arriving fire marshal to hear. "He did this! He's been careless all week!" Chef Malik Freeman stood in the smoky doorway, with a towel in one hand and a burn blistering across his wrist, eyes steady, jaw tight. He had just shut off the gas line with his own hands. He had just dragged a flaming pan into the suppression zone and smothered it under the hood system before it could jump to the grease filters. He had just kept the fire from becoming a disaster. And now, with the smell of scorched oil still in his lungs, he was being blamed like he'd set the place on fire for fun. A few servers looked at Malik with shock. A line cook whispered, "No way." A bartender, pale, stared at Charles like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. But Charles Halverson's voice carried weight in his building, and fear makes people quiet fast. It always had. What Charles didn't realize, what he had forgotten in the rush to protect himself, was that Raven and Rye had cameras in the kitchen now. New ones. Installed 2 weeks earlier after a liquor distributor complained about inventory discrepancies. Charles had wanted surveillance to catch staff mistakes. He hadn't thought about what surveillance catches when the mistake belongs to ownership. And less than an hour after the fire was contained, as firefighters cleared the hood system and the dining room emptied into the cold night, the kitchen camera footage would play on a manager's office monitor and show, frame by frame, who started it. Not Malik, not the line cooks, not carelessness. It would show a shortcut, a deliberate violation, a decision made by Charles himself to save time and money, one that almost turned his restaurant into a headline. By the time the footage ended, the fire marshal's face would be hard as stone, Malik's hands would finally stop shaking, and Charles Halverson would understand the worst part of being caught. You don't just lose control of the story, you lose the right to tell it at all. Raven and Rye sat in downtown Portland, a trendy brick-and-wood restaurant that had built its reputation on modern comfort food and chef-driven seasonal menus. The dining room was dim and intimate, with Edison bulbs and reclaimed wood tables, the kind of place people took dates when they wanted to look like they had taste. The prices were high enough to feel like an experience. The cocktails came smoked under glass domes. The branding leaned on words like craft and authenticity. The truth was less poetic. Raven and Rye was held together by long shifts, underpaid line cooks, and a head chef who cared more about food than praise. Malik Freeman was 32, black, and had been cooking professionally since he was 19. He wasn't a celebrity chef. He wasn't trying to be. He didn't have time for that kind of ego. He had started in a diner, moved to prep in a hotel kitchen, then worked his way into fine dining by being the kind of person who learned fast and stayed late. He had hands that moved with precision and a mind that could taste a dish before it existed. He cared about temperature, timing, and doing things right even when nobody was watching. That last part was rare. He'd been head chef at Raven and Rye for a year and a half. The restaurant's reviews had improved under him. Regulars had started asking for whatever Malik's doing now. A local food blogger once wrote that the kitchen seems to have found its spine. Malik kept that article folded in a drawer at home and never showed anyone, because pride is dangerous in an industry that punishes you for standing too tall. Charles Halverson owned Raven and Rye and loved being called a restaurateur. He was white, mid-40s, handsome in a polished way, and obsessed with appearances. He liked greeting guests at the host stand. He liked posting photos with bottles of expensive whiskey. He liked saying "my chef" like he was collecting talented humans the way other men collected watches. But he didn't like spending money on maintenance, training, or safety. He treated the kitchen like a machine that should produce excellence no matter how cheaply he fed it. Malik had been pushing Charles for months to fix problems. The hood filters were overdue for a deep clean. Malik had documented it. The fire suppression inspection was technically current, but the last technician had warned about grease buildup near the duct line. Malik had forwarded the report to Charles. Charles had replied, "We'll handle it after the spring rush." The gas line on the sauté station had a sticky shutoff valve. Malik had flagged it twice. Charles had said, "It's fine. Don't baby the equipment." The fryer thermostat had started running hotter than displayed. Malik wanted it serviced. Charles bought a cheap replacement gauge online and told the staff to watch it. Malik didn't like any of that, but he was also responsible for his crew. Most of them were young, working 2 jobs, trying to survive. Malik fought where he could, absorbed what he had to, and quietly tried to keep the operation safe despite an owner who treated safety like an inconvenience. The night of the fire was a Friday. Full house, 2 birthdays, 1 engagement dinner, a food critic rumored to be present. Malik had been on the line since 3 p.m., prepping, tasting, adjusting. The kitchen was moving fast but clean. Orders came in steady. Plates went out beautiful. The crew was focused. Then at 8:41, Charles walked into the kitchen. Owners weren't supposed to wander the line during service, but Charles loved doing it because it made him feel important. He stepped behind the expo window and complained about ticket times. He asked why table 12's steak wasn't out. He told Malik to push harder. Malik kept his voice even and said, "We're moving as fast as we can safely." Charles smirked. "Safely," he repeated, like the word itself was weakness. Then Charles noticed the fryer station. A basket had just come up. A line cook named Jamie was draining fries. The fryer was running hot, as it often did now. Malik had told everyone to be careful. Jamie was careful. Charles, however, was impatient. "Why is this taking so long?" Charles snapped. Jamie said, "We're cycling so we don't drop temp too hard." Charles rolled his eyes. "That's why we're behind. Everyone's scared to move." Malik started to step toward him. "Charles!" But Charles was already reaching. He grabbed a metal hotel pan from a shelf, the kind used for holding oil waste, and shoved it toward the fryer. "We can clear this faster if we just—" "Don't!" Malik said sharply, his voice finally cutting through. "Don't do that!" Charles ignored him. He tipped the pan toward the fryer like he was trying to catch excess oil or speed a skim. An absolutely stupid move in a hot commercial kitchen. The pan wasn't meant for that position. It caught heat, shook slightly, and the edge clipped the fryer basket. In a fraction of a second, oil splashed. Not a little. Enough. The oil hit the open flame of the sauté burner nearby, because the line was busy and burners were lit, and it flashed into fire. A bright, violent flare that roared up like a living thing. The kitchen reacted instantly. Jamie jumped back, screaming. A prep cook dropped a tray. Someone yelled, "Fire!" Malik moved like instinct. He grabbed the gas shutoff, but the valve stuck for half a second, the half-second Malik had warned about, then finally turned. He shoved a flaming pan toward the suppression zone under the hood, slapped the emergency hood button, and reached for the Class K extinguisher. Charles froze, not helping, not moving, just staring at the flames like he couldn't believe consequences had the nerve to exist in his kitchen. The suppression system triggered with a hiss, spraying foam. Smoke filled the air. The fire shrank, then sputtered out. The alarm screamed. Malik's wrist caught a burn in the chaos. He didn't notice until after. He was too busy making sure the fire stayed dead. The dining room erupted. Servers rushed guests toward the exit. The hostess cried. Someone called 911. Charles finally moved then, toward the dining room away from the danger he'd created. Firefighters arrived within minutes. The fire was contained, but the hood system was compromised, and smoke damage had spread. The fire marshal ordered everyone out while the ventilation cleared and the suppression system was inspected. Outside, under streetlights and flashing emergency lights, guests gathered with coats pulled tight, annoyed and anxious. Some filmed on their phones. Charles stood near the front, performing concern. He put an arm around a shaking server and said loudly, "Everybody stay calm." Then he turned toward Malik, who was standing with his crew, wrist wrapped in a towel, and made his move. "This was preventable," Charles announced. "I told you to watch the fryer. I told you. Malik, you've been sloppy. You've been reckless. And now look." Malik stared at him. "You did it," he said, voice low. Charles's eyes widened. "Excuse me?" "You tipped the pan," Malik said. "You caused the splash." Charles scoffed loudly. I didn't cause anything. You're the chef. You're responsible. There it was. The way ownership tries to shift blame downward like gravity. The way rich men use hierarchy as a shield. A server whispered, "I saw him," but she didn't say it louder. The fire marshal, a woman named Dana Briggs, white, late 50s, sharp-eyed, watched the exchange without speaking yet. She was trained not to take stories at face value. She asked questions later. She watched first. Charles turned toward her and said, "He should be investigated. He's been unsafe." Dana Briggs said simply, "We'll determine cause." Charles smiled tightly. "Good." Inside, Malik's crew clustered around him. Jamie was crying quietly, shaken. Malik put a hand on his shoulder and said, "You did nothing wrong." Jamie whispered, "He's going to blame you." Malik didn't answer, because he knew. At 9:32, once firefighters had cleared the building enough to allow management inside with escort, Dana Briggs walked into the office with Charles, Malik, and the general manager, Leah Kim. Leah was Korean-American, early 30s, and looked like she wanted to quit and sleep for a week. She had been the one who pushed Charles to install cameras after the distributor complaint. She had also been the one begging him to do maintenance. He ignored her, too. Dana Briggs sat at the desk, opened her notebook, and said, "I need a timeline." Charles spoke first, of course. He always did. He described fryer mishandling, careless staff, lack of supervision. He said Malik had been warned. He framed himself as responsible ownership dealing with a reckless kitchen. He even performed sadness. "I care about my people," he said, like the fire hadn't just proven otherwise. Malik listened without interrupting. When Dana turned to Malik, she asked, "Your version?" Malik spoke plainly. The owner entered the line during service. He tried to rush the fryer process. He tipped a metal pan near the fryer and clipped the basket. Oil splashed onto an open flame. Fire started. I shut off gas, triggered suppression, and used the extinguisher. Charles laughed sharply. "That is not what happened." Dana Briggs's eyes stayed on Malik. "Were there cameras in the kitchen?" Leah Kim spoke quietly. "Yes, installed 2 weeks ago. We have full coverage over fryer and sauté." Charles's head snapped toward her. "Leah," Dana Briggs said, "pull it up." Charles's face changed, just slightly, but Malik saw it. The moment a man realizes his story has an enemy. Leah opened the security system on her computer. Her hands trembled as she typed, but she got the feed. She found the timestamp. 8:41 p.m. Dana leaned forward. "Play." The footage appeared, grainy but clear. The line in motion. Jamie draining fries. Malik moving at expo. Charles entering the frame from the side, stepping too close. Malik turning toward him. Charles grabbing the pan. Malik's hand lifting in warning. Charles tipping the pan anyway. Then the splash. Then the flare. Then Malik moving fast. Shut off, hood button, extinguisher. While Charles froze and backed away. Dana Briggs watched without blinking. Leah Kim covered her mouth. Malik felt something in his chest loosen and tighten at the same time. Vindication doesn't feel clean. It feels like your nervous system finally being allowed to stop defending reality. Charles stared at the screen like it was betrayal. Dana paused the video at the exact frame where oil splashed and flame ignited. She pointed at the monitor with a pen. "That's you," she said to Charles. Charles swallowed. "I was trying to help." Dana's voice went cold. "You violated basic kitchen safety and caused an oil ignition." Charles tried to salvage. "But he shouldn't have had the burner." Dana cut him off. "Commercial kitchens run burners during service. You introduced a hazard. Then you attempted to assign blame to staff." Leah Kim whispered, almost to herself. "Oh my God." Dana turned to Malik. "You shut off gas and triggered suppression. That prevented spread." Malik nodded once. "Yes." Dana looked at Malik's wrapped wrist. "Injury. Minor burn." Dana's jaw tightened. She turned back to Charles. "You're going to provide workers' compensation documentation and an incident report, and I'm issuing a temporary closure. Your hood system must be fully serviced and inspected before reopening. Also, I'm filing this as owner-caused negligence." Charles's face went pale. "You can't." Dana's eyes were ice. "I can." The room went silent. Charles's entire identity, owner, boss, authority, was built on being untouchable. Now a government official was naming his actions in plain language. Negligence. Owner caused. Those words don't wash off with PR. Leah Kim looked at Malik and whispered, "I'm sorry." Malik exhaled slowly. "I know." Then Dana Briggs said the sentence that ended Charles's attempt to destroy Malik. "Chef Freeman is not being blamed for this incident," she said firmly. "If anything, his response likely prevented serious injury." Charles's mouth opened. He had nothing left. Outside, word spread fast. A server posted a clip. No faces, just the camera screen showing the owner's mistake. It hit social media within an hour because people love a fall from arrogance. By midnight, Raven and Rye Fire was trending locally. Comments exploded. Former employees chimed in. "He always cut corners. He never fixed the hood. He bullied staff." The internet loves receipts. The camera was a receipt. The next morning, reporters called. Charles tried to control the narrative, but the footage made narrative control impossible. He issued a statement blaming kitchen procedures. Then someone leaked the fire marshal's preliminary report. Then Leah Kim, exhausted and furious, quit and sent her resignation to the entire staff list with one sentence: "I'm done protecting someone who endangers people and lies." Malik didn't celebrate. He slept. For the first time in months, he slept deeply. 2 days later, the restaurant's landlord called an emergency meeting with Charles. Insurance adjusters visited. The fire marshal's closure remained. The staff worried about pay. Malik worried about his crew. They were the ones who would suffer first. Always. So Malik did what leaders do when institutions fail. He organized. He gathered the kitchen staff, line cooks, dishwashers, servers, at a nearby cafe and told them the truth. Charles will try to reopen fast. He will try to cut corners again, and he will blame us again when it goes wrong. Jamie asked, voice shaking, "What do we do?" Malik said, "We don't go back unless it's safe, and we don't go back unless we're respected." They voted quietly but decisively to demand written safety commitments and fair back pay during closure. Leah Kim helped them from the outside, sending them the maintenance emails she had documented for months. More receipts. Charles fought at first. He threatened to replace them. Then he realized replacing an entire trained staff in the middle of a public scandal wasn't easy. Not when the internet clip existed. Not when the fire marshal report existed. Not when workers were talking. A week later, Charles offered Malik his job back conditionally, with a raise, as if money could erase the attempted blame. Malik looked at the offer and said, "You tried to fire me in front of my crew." Charles said, "I was stressed." Malik replied, "Stress doesn't make your character less true. It reveals it." Charles's face tightened. "So what do you want?" Malik's answer was simple. "I want you out of the kitchen. Forever. You don't step on my line. You don't rush my staff. You don't touch equipment. And you put safety upgrades in writing." Charles sneered. "You don't get to give orders." Malik met his eyes. "Then you don't get your restaurant back." Because Malik had leverage now. Not because he wanted it, because the camera gave it to him. The landlord, more worried about liability than ego, sided with Malik. So did the insurer. So did the fire marshal. Charles signed the agreement with a face like stone. Raven and Rye reopened 3 weeks later with a cleaned hood system, replaced fryer components, a new safety training protocol, and an owner who stayed out of the kitchen because he'd been forced to. Malik returned to the line with his crew, and for the first time in a long time, the kitchen felt less like a minefield. On opening night, a couple at table 12 asked the server, "Is the chef okay? We heard what happened." The server smiled. "Chef Freeman is fine. He's the reason this place didn't burn down." Malik heard that from the past and felt something inside him settle. Not pride, relief. Because being seen accurately matters when you've been misnamed for too long. And that was the ending. The restaurant owner blamed the black chef for the fire because blame was his reflex, and racism made it easy. He tried to turn Malik into the scapegoat in front of customers, staff, and the fire marshal because he believed his status would outweigh the truth. Then the kitchen camera revealed everything. His shortcut, his mistake, his lie, and the same footage he installed to control his workers became the evidence that exposed him.